The Russian armed forces have repeated their actions. After Avdiivka and Suza, Moscow has once again used the gas pipeline as an infiltration route. And pay attention, according to the Ukrainian channel Deep State itself, this is by no means just a one-time trick, but rather an entire logistical artery that allows for the movement of whole groups of troops, with carts, electric scooters, and even specially designated rest stops. An operation that combines the creativity of guerrilla warfare, like in Vietnam or Gaza, with the capabilities of a modern state army. We always start from the beginning with the most important things. Kupyansk is a key point on the map of the Ukrainian conflict because it has practically everything. It is both a railway station and an important logistical hub for the armed forces of Ukraine. A symbolic point because at one time it had to be abandoned in 2022 by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And furthermore, it is the key gateway for entry into the Slavensk and Kramatorsk agglomeration, which is now the hottest spot of the entire Ukrainian conflict. Therefore, Russia is obviously doing everything possible and impossible, we'll see this in a moment, to control the town in question. Because losing it would mean for the Kiev regime, on one hand, it would allow a major advance of the Russian Federation's troops in the Kharkov region. However, and perhaps more importantly, it would give Russia free rein to take definitive control of the Donetsk People's Republic, which is one of the key objectives of the special military operation. That said, the tactic we're about to discuss next, this isn't the first time Russia has used it. In fact, it's at least the third time. It already happened in Avdiivka, in Suza, and now, well, it's happening again in Kupyansk. In other words, rather than being an isolated incident, it seems like a well-planned and organized strategy. Yes, indeed, this seems more like a pattern in the Russian military strategy, a military strategy that, by the way, even their own sources are commenting on. In this case, the military analysis channel Deep State says that the Russians created an underground corridor that goes from Iman Pervi to Rachkovka. And it's nothing more than a refurbished gas pipeline, which, by the way, allows entire groups of Russian troops to move through it. And not just in any way, but surprisingly using special carts as well as electric scooters.
Again, damn, we're riding in the pipe. Basically, the guys are ahead, pushing each other on carts. Basically, the pipe is 4 kilometers long. It's a long pipe, basically. In the Blyat position at the end and at the Blyat trap, I can already see it.
An inventiveness that's truly surprising, and especially a lot considering that the journey itself lasts about 4 days. And to actually carry it out successfully. There are even designated rest points for the troops, with supplies included. And in short, to put it very simply, it is built to take Russian soldiers from Imam Pervi to Rachkovka. They arrive in Rachkovka and from there they go to a forest area called Bosque Kosa, near Kupyansk, and then later spread out throughout the city. The most striking thing about this is the complaints. The same Ukrainian channel Deep State says that Ukraine doesn't seem to have learned from either Avdiivka or Suza, now allowing also for the third consecutive time Russian troops to settle comfortably in the town, in this case Kupyansk. It also refers to Kupyansk. In the city, there is not only Russian infantry, but also specially designated points for drone takeoff. The strategy itself is nothing new in terms of global military strategy. I mean, worldwide. In fact, it was widely used in several countries around the world. And the most significant examples of this might be Vietnam, where the Viet Cong used a very complex network of tunnels to resist the United States Army. Much stronger and larger in Gaza, where Hamas created what we know as the Gaza Metro, a network of tunnels, which they used to surprise Israeli troops. In Syria, both the rebels and Islamic State of Iraq and Syria used underground tunnels for occasional ambushes or defense. But here there's an absolutely crucial difference, and that's that all of those were guerrilla movements, meaning they didn't have the strength of a regular state army. Unlike the Russian Federation, which has used this guerrilla creativity and turned it into a regular offensive strategy. And not only that, but instead of digging improvised tunnels, it has taken advantage of a very complex infrastructure, such as, for example, the gas pipelines, but already existing for much faster troop movements and therefore much more numerous and surprising. Of course, because it is precisely that inventiveness, that quantitative leap, which has surprised and continues to surprise both Ukraine and, of course, all of NATO. And in fact, that's exactly what deep state's complaints reflect: bewilderment and frustration. They came as if they appeared out of nowhere, causing significant chaos within the Ukrainian troops. Logistics are overwhelmed, morale plummets. And all of this opens the way for the Russian Federation, directly to the heart of the Donetsk People's Republic, which is the Slavinsky-Kramatorsk agglomeration. For the West, this news is, of course, extremely uncomfortable, as it goes against the well-known narrative that the Russian army is absolutely rigid and not flexible at all. And look at that on the battlefield. It's actually proving the exact opposite. The consequences could be even more devastating than that media effect, which is more short-term. And it's not just that Russia is once again demonstrating its capacity for innovation in military terms, but it's also facing a sustained advance in the Kupyansk area. And much more, which is the fulfillment of its main objective: control over the entire Donetsk People's Republic, a gas pipeline turned into a military corridor. Electric scooters, special carts, rest areas. It seems more like science fiction, but it's actually a reality, one that in fact even Ukraine itself now acknowledges. From Vietnam to the subway, history is full of tunnels, but what's happening in Kupyansk is something radically different. Much more important, in fact, is the creativity of the guerrilla taken to the level of a regular army and multiplied by its capabilities. And the million-dollar question is whether we're looking at an isolated strategy or a new model of underground warfare of the Russian Federation that will accelerate the end. Which conflict? I'll read your comments. Thank you.